I was returning from the city market with my hands marked by the weight of the shopping bags. The fresh morning air filtered through the quiet streets of Savannah, and as I walked, I thought about what I'd prepare for lunch. When I opened the door, the silence of the hallway was broken by a sharp voice. Brooke was standing in the center of the living room, arms crossed, lips tense. Either you wait on my mom like you're her maid, or you get out for good. I stood still for a few seconds. Behind her, in the guest room, I knew Mrs. Dolores was settling in as if it were a resort. She'd only been in the house for 3 days and was already acting like she owned the place. I didn't say anything. I crossed the living room and went up the stairs with firm steps, feeling her eyes on my back. In my bedroom, I set the bags on the bed and opened the closet. The blue suitcase I'd used on my last trip with my late husband was on the top shelf. I brought it down carefully, shaking off the dust that time had left behind. I wasn't going to stay and argue or beg. As I folded clothes, the phone vibrated on the dresser. A notification lit up the screen, a message from Brooke, but clearly not meant for me. I opened it without hesitation. This week, we kick her out and start on the house paperwork. I felt a dry chill run down my spine. So it wasn't just about forcing me to take care of her mother. They wanted to push me out of my own home and pull strings to take it for themselves. I put the phone in my pocket and finished packing. Each piece of clothing that fell into the suitcase was a reminder that it was time to protect what was left of my dignity. I went down slowly, with the suitcase rolling down the steps. I passed by Brooke, who was pretending to check her phone, and left the market bags on the kitchen counter without looking at her. I opened the front door and stepped out. The cool air hit my face, clearing away any doubt. I walked to the taxi stand at the corner, without looking back, as the car pulled away down the avenue. My mind was already calculating the next steps. The inn was just a few blocks from the cathedral basilica, an old building with the smell of polished wood and fresh brewed coffee. The owner, a kind woman named Mildred, handed me the key and pointed out the room on the second floor. As soon as I closed the door, I set the suitcase by the bed and sat at the small table by the window. I took out my account ledger, the same one I'd kept for years with the discipline of a clockmaker. Each figure written there was a reminder of what I'd given without asking for anything in return. $18,000 for Landon and Brooke's wedding. I wanted it to be a perfect day. Even though her family couldn't contribute anything, I paid for the reception, the flowers, the music, the dress, everything. $40,000 for the down payment on the house. I did it convinced it was an investment in my son's future, that helping them get started would give them stability, and for 7 years. Monthly contributions for the mortgage and household expenses, electricity, water, gas, grocery shopping, each month. A portion of my pension and savings went straight to supporting that home. I flipped through the pages, reviewing the payments with a knot in my stomach. Gratitude never came. Instead, I got an ultimatum. I closed the ledger decisively. That chapter of my life ended here. I took out my phone and dialed the bank. After a few minutes on hold, a friendly voice asked for my account details. I want to cancel the automatic mortgage payment for the house on Abercorn Street, I said without hesitation. Are you sure? Mrs. Hawthorne, this payment has been active for many years. Absolutely sure. Starting today. That responsibility isn't mine. I hung up and felt a strange lightness. It wasn't just money. It was cutting the cord that kept me tied to a dynamic that was consuming me. I poured myself a coffee from the small thermos Mildred had left on the dresser. Outside, the bells of the cathedral marked the hour. In cities like Savannah, news spreads faster than the wind. I knew that. In a matter of days, more than one person would hear that I was no longer funding Landon and Brooke's life. as I stirred the coffee. I thought about the next step. I needed something more than cutting off the money. I needed to understand how far they were willing to go. And for that, I'd have to talk to someone who knew a lot more than they let on. The morning was chilly, but the inside of the Wanderers Cafe smelled of fresh baked bread and strong coffee. It was one of those places where conversations mixed with the clinking of spoons. I sat at a corner table, and just a few minutes later, I saw Victor Langston walk in, the former manager of the bank branch where I'd opened my first account. He approached with a warm smile, but his eyes showed some concern. After the usual greetings, he asked that we speak discreetly. "Evelyn, there's something you need to know," he began, lowering his voice. "A few months ago, Brooke came to the bank to apply for a loan." I shrugged, not yet grasping the full extent of his words. "That wouldn't be unusual if it weren't for the fact that she tried to use your house as collateral." He continued. I felt the coffee grow cold in my hands. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. The documents she presented were manipulated. I flipped through the pages, recognizing at a glance the forged handwriting and letterhead. But what chilled my blood was seeing, at the end of the file, the witness signature, Landon Hawthorne. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, that someone had used his name without permission. "Are you sure he was there?" I asked in a thin voice. Victor nodded slowly. "Evelyn, I saw it myself. He was there with her." He signed without hesitation. I leaned back in the chair, feeling a new weight in my chest. It wasn't just Brooke. My own son had endorsed a lie to put at risk the only thing of value I had left. Victor explained that the application was rejected after an internal review, but he wanted to warn me in case they tried something similar elsewhere. He gave me certified copies of all the documents. Just in case, I tucked them into my purse like someone storing a loaded weapon. We finished the coffee with little conversation. My mind was elsewhere, reviewing every gesture, every word from Landon in recent months. Now it all took on a bitter sense. As I left the Wanderers Cafe, the cool air of Savannah hit my face, bringing me back to reality. I knew it was time to start moving my own pieces, and for that, I needed to activate key people who could tip the scales in my favor. I left the Wanderers Cafe with the document copies safely tucked in my purse and a plan beginning to take shape. I couldn't confront Brooke and Landon head-on yet. First, I had to shift the ground beneath their feet. The first stop was the Savannah City Market. I've known Loretta, the fruit vendor, for over 20 years, while she weighed some oranges for me. I mentioned casually that I was seeking advice because someone had tried to use my house as collateral without my permission. I didn't name names, but the seed was planted. Loretta frowned and muttered something about how shameless some people are. Next, I stopped by Daphne's hair salon on Broughton Street. I'd gotten my hair cut there the week before, but this time I wasn't there for a service. I sat waiting my turn, pretending to check my phone, and let slip in a low voice that I was staying at an inn due to problems at home. A couple of clients looked up. Daphne, always ready to listen, asked if it was serious. I replied that I could only say there were people willing to forge papers to take what doesn't belong to them. The knowing glances among the women in the room confirmed that the rumor was starting to form. Finally, that same afternoon, I went to St. Michael's Church. Pastor Elias received me in the parish office. I told him I was going through a complicated situation and would appreciate his prayers. When he asked what was happening, I explained in more detail how they'd tried to appropriate my home. He nodded gravely and said that the community deserves to know the truth to prevent injustices. In Savannah, news moves like the wind whisper in 3 different places. And in less than a week, everyone knows and I'd chosen those 3 spots deliberately. A few days later, I heard from Mildred, the inn owner, that Brooke was uncomfortable. She says people are looking at her funny at the market, she commented with a half smile. I didn't respond, but I knew the network was working. It was time to take the next step. And for that, I needed one more piece evidence that would shatter the perfect facade of Brooke and her mother. It didn't take long for me to learn that Brooke had started moving her own pieces. At the market, some looks turned inquisitive, and a neighbor told me in a low voice that Brooke was saying I had mental issues, and that's why I'd abandoned my home. She even claimed her mother, Mrs. Dolores, was ill and needed constant care. Justifying her stay in the house that way, it didn't surprise me. It was exactly the strategy I'd imagined, portraying herself as the victim and me as an unbalanced woman who'd left a helpless elderly lady behind. However, what I didn't expect was receiving an envelope with no sender at the inn's reception. Inside was a single photograph, printed on glossy paper. In the image, Mrs. Dolores appeared at a spa in Hot Springs, Arkansas, lounging on a chaise by a heated pool, with a cocktail in hand and a wide smile. She wore sunglasses, a wide-brimmed hat, and a white robe with the place's logo embroidered on the chest. There was no trace of illness or frailty. I spent a few minutes staring at the photo. With a mix of relief and determination, this wasn't just a rebuttal to their words. It was irrefutable visual proof. I stored it in a plastic sleeve, along with the copies of the forged documents Victor had given me. Now the case against them was stronger than ever. That same afternoon, I called Sophia Bellamy, my trusted lawyer. We'd known each other for years. Since she helped me with my parents' inheritance, I told her everything in detail, from Brooke's ultimatum to the fraud attempt. And now the spa photo. Sophia listened silently, taking quick notes. "We have enough grounds to start an eviction procedure," she said firmly. "It'll be a clear legal process, and with this evidence, their arguments will fall apart." We agreed to meet the next day at her office to sign the petition. I hung up and stared out the window of the inn room. The afternoon was falling over Savannah, and the lights were starting to come on in the streets. I knew this move would change the tone of the game. Until now, I'd worked in the shadows. But from this moment on, everything would be out in the open. And my next move was going to make it clear to them that I wasn't backing down anymore. Saturday dawned with a clear sky, the kind that invites you out. I decided to go to the market at Chippewa Square. Not because I needed to buy anything, but because I sensed I might find the opportunity I was waiting for there. Among the stalls, the smell of fresh-baked bread and the bustle of people created that familiar atmosphere I loved so much. I hadn't walked halfway through the market when I heard a voice I recognized instantly. "There she is." "The woman who left a sick, elderly lady without a roof," said Brooke, in a tone loud enough for everyone around to hear. Several people turned their heads toward me. Brooke was a few feet away, with Mrs. Dolores at her side, wrapped in a shawl as if the morning chill weighed heavier on her than on others. My daughter-in-law kept talking, with a theatrical gesture of indignation. "My mom is in delicate health, and her own family, kicks her to the curb." I approached slowly, without losing my calm. I reached into my purse and pulled out the transparent folder. Without a word, I took out the spa photo and held it up for everyone to see. In the image, Mrs. Dolores appeared smiling, with a cocktail in hand, under the sun in Hot Springs. The murmur was immediate. A couple of people came closer to look, and someone snapped a photo with their phone. In a matter of minutes, I saw several neighbors sending the image via text. Messages started pinging in various purses and pockets. Brooke's expression changed. She tried to say something, but the wave of murmurs grew around her. Mrs. Dolores lowered her gaze, avoiding the inquisitive looks at all costs. I simply put the photo away and continued my way through the market, as if nothing had happened. But inside, I felt that the first real crack in their facade had just opened. When I finished my rounds and headed out to Broughton Street, the phone vibrated. It was a message from Mildred. "The photo's all over the neighborhood. Everyone's talking about it here." I smiled to myself. It was the perfect moment to deliver the next blow, one that wouldn't just affect their reputation, but also their ability to stay in my house. Sophia's call came on a Tuesday morning while I was having coffee at the inn. "Evelyn, the judge has signed the eviction order. They have 30 days to vacate the property," she said. With that mix of firmness and satisfaction you only hear when justice backs the obvious. I hung up and stared at the cup. It wasn't time for celebrations. It was time to make sure they wouldn't find a loophole to resist. So I dialed 3 numbers I'd saved from years ago. The first was a utility company where Brooke had unpaid bills. I provided the current address, my house. The second, a dental clinic that had been looking for her for months over an unpaid treatment. And the third, the most delicate and informal lender from Atlanta. I knew, from past conversations with Landon, that he and Brooke had borrowed money there to cover a failed business. I left them the same address and thanked them for their interest in collecting what was owed. I didn't have to wait long. In just a week, the calls multiplied. First, polite attempts to clarify the situation. Then, drier tones, visits to the house, and notes slipped under the door. For my part, I didn't respond to anything. I counted 22 contact attempts that week alone, missed calls, text messages, voicemails, all unanswered. Mildred, the inn owner, warned me they'd stopped by asking for me, but she, with the loyalty of someone who knows the neighborhood rules, told them she hadn't seen me in days. Brooke, according to Loretta, the fruit vendor, no longer went to the market. She sent her mother or ordered groceries by phone. Landon, on the other hand, had started showing up in places I used to frequent, as if he wanted to run into me by chance. I observed everything with the coolness of someone who knows the game is tilting in their favor. Every move of theirs was a reaction, not a strategy, and I had already decided what my next play would be, one that wouldn't just back them into a corner, but would seal the end of their game. Landon's call came at dawn. His voice sounded tired, almost broken. When he asked to meet at Forsyth Park, I agreed, more out of curiosity than anything else. I wanted to see his face while he tried to convince me. I arrived on time. He was sitting on a bench, hands clasped and shoulders hunched. When he saw me, he stood up right away. "Mom, we need to talk," he started, avoiding direct eye contact. "This eviction thing, it doesn't have to go this far. We can fix it." I listened in silence. He talked about family, about not ruining everything over a misunderstanding, and about giving Brooke time to reorganize. But I didn't take long to respond. "No, Landon, the process continues. And just so you know, the house already has a new purpose." His brow furrowed. "Selling it," I shook my head. "It'll be donated to a cooperative for senior women. They're going to turn it into assisted apartments for those who have nowhere to live. It'll be a safe place for them, not a trophy for anyone looking to take advantage." Landon looked at me as if he didn't fully understand. Maybe he expected me to say there was a way to save it, but there was nothing left of the mother who always found excuses for his mistakes. That same afternoon, the news reached Brooke's ears. I don't know if he told her or if she heard through the inevitable neighborhood rumor chain, but her reaction was immediate. She packed her bags and left the city, without goodbyes or explanations. Some said she went north, others that she crossed to Canada with a friend. The truth is, she left Landon with all the debts and a ruined reputation. The creditors no longer had a second target to pressure. All the weight now fell on him. From the inn window, I watched the fine rain starting to fall on Savannah's streets. I didn't feel triumph, but a serene calm. I knew that, for the first time in a long time, the board was completely in my favor. And it was time to make my final move. I never set foot in that house again to live there. Instead, I found a small attic in the historic district, with sloped ceilings and a window that opened directly toward the old cobblestone streets. It was modest, but mine. From there, the murmur of the ancient roads and the chiming of St. Michael's bells mixed with my morning coffee. While I built a quiet life, the old house underwent its transformation. Architects and volunteers worked for months until it became Hawthorne House, a safe and bright space for senior women. With pottery workshops, cooking classes, and an urban garden visible from the street. The inauguration was on a June day, with clean sun and a gentle breeze, neighbors, local press, and women who'd waited for this moment filled the central courtyard. I greeted, listened to stories, and watched the project come to life. That's when I saw him, Landon, standing at the entrance, alone. He didn't approach to greet me or seek eye contact. He walked to the welcome table, left a white envelope, and departed without a word. I waited until I was alone to open it. Inside, a folded sheet with his unmistakable handwriting. Mom, I learned too late what your respect is worth. This house bears your name and your strength. There was nothing more, no long apology or empty promises. Just those 2 sentences. I stared at the words for a while, letting them settle. Like soil about to receive a seed, I tucked the letter into the inner pocket of my jacket and joined the group waiting in the courtyard. We had to plant an oak tree, a symbol of roots and resilience. As the sun bathed the old stones and the damp earth, I thought that maybe, someday, Landon would dare to cross that door not as a son in debt, but as a man able to carry his own weight. But that day hadn't come yet. Now, what mattered was that Hawthorne House was alive, and I, with my hands stained with soil, was to